Welcome into an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is not Alan Saunders. That is Nick Farabaugh. Alan Saunders not on the afternoon drive the rest of the week on vacation. And because of that, we are trying to bring Alan Saunders kind of with us in a way, spiritually here by having the palm trees and the ocean going on in the background, that type of vibe. So, Nick, how we doing?
Yeah, Alan went to the ocean and the sunshine, and I am in the oak trees and the clouds right now, over here in Pittsburgh. But you know what? Alan went on vacation during the week we're supposed to get like 80-degree weather with sun all week. So
Hmm.
where's he really running from? He just gets the ocean and palm trees. He only gets the feeling of paradise, right?
He has a knack too for like bad weather following him. So like I wouldn't be surprised if like we're supposed to get rain the end of the week if that doesn't happen here and he just gets torrential downpour most of his trip.
Yeah, it
That's
would
kind of what
be
I'm
interesting.
expecting.
Currently, right now, though, it looks beautiful where he's at.
It
Um,
does.
from where the bar he posted with Omar Khan on it because he was on Pat McAfee today, and I guess this is a good
Mhm.
place to kind of segue into what we're going to
Yeah.
talk about. We're going to talk about wide receivers today, but I don't really want to talk too much about speculation about Brian McFadden sent out a tweet yesterday that said they are working on a significant playmaker. Guys, we could talk about Ayuk, Debo, DK Metcalf. We could. I don't care. We could make it up and say Tyreek Hill's coming, but we really don't know much of what's happening. So I want to talk about what the Steelers do have and kind of what they need in a playmaker if they're going to get somebody. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Roman Wilson first, Smitty.
Yeah.
Um, I think he's the guy that right now you would probably slot in as wide receiver too. It's a perilous kind of role to put him
Mhm.
in. I think you're asking a lot of Roman Wilson, but what do you kind of think of Roman Wilson right now?
I mean, I think that you're spot on, and he immediately, upon being drafted, becomes the second most talented receiver in the room. I'm curious to see how they view his inside-outside versatility. I know Arthur Smith kind of touched on that a little bit, like there's some growth there where they do see him eventually getting to that point, which leads me to believe they view him as the guy that's going to slot in the slot right away. So I liked him as a player, came in as my wide receiver 11. I do think that obviously the athleticism that he brings to the position, really good speed, can take the top off from that slot position. Willing blocker, despite maybe not having the largest frame. I think that was probably something that they fell in love with. And Nick, if I don't know if I texted you about this, it might have been us that was having the conversation. I had so many conversations with people during draft week that I don't even know. But with the way that the board looked for day two, somebody texted me and said it looks like a center or Roman Wilson at 51. It ended up obviously they got both of those things. But I knew that Zach Azani really liked Roman Wilson, so I wasn't surprised that they had their eyes on him and took him. But I think what's interesting is they're still missing like something in the room, like an archetype from the room, a skill set from the room. And that's what I think we're going to have a conversation about today is like where Roman Wilson, what he didn't add with the addition of Roman Wilson, what is this room still looking for?
Yeah, listen, I like Roman Wilson. Kind of a perfect archetype of Arthur Smith slot receiver.
Mm-hmm.
You look at what Roman Wilson brings to the table, and he did not have that in Atlanta last year at all. Like, look at that Atlanta receiving core. I think Pickens can
Yeah.
be London. I don't think he had a Roman Wilson, who is this kind of speedy dot that just flies over the field, is really tough, makes catches underneath, over the middle, between the numbers, runs crosses really well. I wish he kind of would differ his route pacing because I just think he's a one speed go. Like he runs everything full speed, and sometimes you do need to switch up the route pacing a little bit to become more nuanced. He'll need to do that to defeat press coverage. Um, right now, what they need, man, is an outside guy that is bigger and can, make defenses respect George Pickens. Because what I think right now is teams are just going to double team George all game and they're going to
Sure.
dare, whoever else of that receiving core to beat them. And you could include Muth in there and all those guys too. I don't blame you if you do. I think Muth will function as another kind of receiver archetype, but they need a big dude that could probably, or they need, a guy like Deontay if they really want to, a guy that blocks though at that size.
Yeah.
That's what they really need. So, that's why, I think Cortland Sutton has been kind of making so much sense because he fits the archetype of what they need. Big guy, you know, probably a better separator than's given credit for. Like, that's not his main thing, but he can do it in a bit. Big time go ball guy, fits Russ's strengths, can play outside and can block his behind off. Like, that's what they need out of that guy. So, other names that you could bring up there that are kind of free agent types is like a DJ Chark, who has very, very big separation problems. Doesn't really separate, but big,
Mhm.
fast, blocks, can make catches down the field. Like, that's the type of guy we're talking about here. So that's really what they need because they got this kind of quick, small separator speed guy, and Roman Wilson can kind of play outside a little bit. I think what I mean by that is I don't think they're gonna go 11 personnel and like line him up on the line as an X out there. That's kind of what they need. They need a guy that can be an X and line up there so they can do things with George. What Roman Wilson though can do is when they're in 12 personnel and they're playing, in stacks and bunches and condensed sets, they can protect him, put a guy like Fryermuth up on the line or Darnell Washington up on the line, let him get free releases, kind of get pick routes, let him go across the middle on crosses. I think they can do a few really cool things with Roman Wilson in 12 personnel and kind of use him as a quasi outside guy. They could set him in motion, like cheat motion, like, the obviously was very popularized by Miami last year with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think
Mhm.
send him on some of that, kind of free him up, let him run across the field and use his speed because he is a dynamic speed threat, especially across the horizontal part of the field. So I think they can do that, but they need a big dude that can line up there on the X and be that outside guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to bring up, the route tree was probably the one question, or not the one question, but one of the first questions I have when watching Roman Wilson. Like, you see a lot of shallow crossers, deep overs, in and out breakers, but not much, beyond that. So, like, is that something that they're going to look to diversify at the next level? Is that kind of what Arthur Smith was alluding to, or are they just going to play to his strengths and just kind of utilize those things within the offense? But yeah, I mean, you mentioned some good names there. Allen put out an article with like 5 remaining wide receiver free agent targets. Out of those names, you mentioned DJ Chark. He's really the one that I would probably have the most interest in out of that group. I mean, you talked about guys like Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham Jr. at this point in his career. Michael Gallup actually signed yesterday with the Raiders, so he would be crossed off that list. And then Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Of that group, not DJ Chark, because we kind of just touched on him, or at least you did. Do any of those other names add what this room needs in your opinion, or do they need to look elsewhere to find it?
I think the best option outside Shark might be the guy that was cut today. It was Zay Jones.
Is it? Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Like now, again, I really think what they need to do is plan A needs to be what they're doing right now, which seems to be kind of shopping around, seeing what's out on the trade market. And that's where you'll
Mhm.
get a really good player that's truly an upgrade and will make this receiving core good. But they need to get someone. Like they can't go in here with what they have right now. This can't be the plan right now. So to prevent it from being, just a complete question of my goodness, what happens if George Pickens or Roman Wilson gets hurt? Go out
Mhm.
there and get a Chark or a Zay Jones who, like, okay, they signed Zay Jones or DJ Chark. Let's be real here, Zach. I think both of our reactions are going to be, right? Like, that's going to be your reaction, but it's going to also be like, well, that guy's better than Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins. Like, that's really
Yeah,
what it
sure.
is. And so they're upgrades. Even if they're not, clear kind of cut elite good players. I think Jones is interesting just because he's a true X that has some separation ability, can make some
In the
tough.
last full season he played, he looked really good. He was just hurt so often last year.
Yeah, I mean PCL sprain and then apparently cartilage damage in his femur. It's not great from the
Right.
sound of that, but we'll kind of see where that goes. I think he could be interesting. I will say though, over the last 2 years, I believe he's been one of the least efficient receivers in football when he has been playing. And I'm talking like bottom 10 for efficiency. So more of a volume guy, at least he was for when he put up a career high, I believe over 800 yards in 22. But
Mhm.
probably is going to be one your best option maybe after that. And the reason is I'm just not sure, Odell fits what I'm talking about here. Can be outside, yeah, but elite blocker, not really. Um, you know, Michael Thomas is probably at this point in his career more suited for a slot role. Same thing with like a Hunter Renfro. And I've seen Hunter Renfro brought up a lot. That guy's a slot.
Yeah.
Tyler Boyd, a slot receiver. So a lot of the guys that are out there right now, like if they had drafted a big outside receiver, I think finding the slot would be very easy.
Hmm.
They could easily look for a Hunter Renfro or Tyler Boyd in that case, but now that they need an outside guy, it's probably a Chark or a Zay Jones. MVS is just so inconsistent. I think he has some traits, like he has the speed downfield. He's a pretty good blocker too. He's just so inconsistent. And if you watched Chiefs games last year, if you were a Chiefs fan, you probably would have pulled your hair out watching MVS over a full season.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess
Well,
we'll
we
see
know
on.
if we can get to the playoffs, though, he's going to perform. At least make a
Yeah,
big
yeah,
one or two
right.
big
I mean, I
catches.
guess but they need to add someone here.
Yeah, yeah.
And if the trade is not going to materialize, I think Chark or Jones probably make the most sense. Again, those aren't going to be like names where you're like, oh, I'm so excited about this, like difference makers, but they can be guys that can at least give you a quality floor play and are an upgrade over your roster right now. And they're not going to cost much. So it makes sense.
So I mean, by the way that you're talking, it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat as me because I put out a post as soon as we drafted Roman Wilson, and I said we're going to find out about how the Steelers view his versatility based off the next receiver that they target. So if they view him as a guy that's going to be in the slot, you're absolutely right. But is that like, are we resigned to that fact, or do we think that they do view him as a guy that can play on the outside? And if that's the case, is the door still open for Tyler Boyd, Hunter Renfro, or somebody of that ilk?
Let me find this quote that Arthur Smith said. He legitimately I believe he said that he was hoping that Roman Wilson could add inside out flex, which I mean, I think pretty clearly would signal that they don't view him as a slot receiver. But it's always, I mean, as a outside receiver, but it's always possible. But my guess
Mhm.
is that they view him in that slot that can sometimes go out. I don't think that is like the ideal kind of role that they would have for him though. I think he can grow into it. I just am not sure
Mhm.
year one that okay, now here's what he said. Yeah. He said, I mean, he's got inside out flex. Certainly you like the instincts that you can play inside. In those obvious pass situations, he'll have a lot of versatility. Okay, so they might there. But he also says this. Hopefully, we can continue to work with this guy and expand his game and have a little bit more inside out flex. So, what to me is what he's saying is probably that he can play a little inside outside, but probably can't play true outside right now. And what I mean by that is 11 personnel line him up on the X. I think he's
Yeah.
right. In his offense, he can play a little outside with the things I talked about, the motions, the condensed sets. Like you can be an outside receiver with that because it's going to mask him. And he's not going to
Mhm.
be asked to beat press in those situations where you have him off the line in like a stack set or a bunch set, and he's off the line and can do all that. Like I think he can do that. But they don't really have a guy right now that in 11 personnel is going to put the fear in you to put him outside. So my guess is they add someone that can do that. And I think that's the right way to go about it. So I think Arthur Smith, you know, is probably kind of looking at Roman Wilson as a guy that's going to play a lot year one, rightfully so. I think he's pretty polished. I don't think he's like a raw
Mhm.
player. But I do think year two, that's where the big leap for inside out flex would come from. Maybe he even kind of grows over the year and that can become something. But week one, I wouldn't trust him as that.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm sure we probably are going to have some questions about the receiver stuff. So, did you have anything else specifically you wanted to bring up before we get into some of these questions?
No, 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 no. Yeah.
Okay. Would you be Matt? Let's go to Matt first to kind of vary up here. Not a receiver question. Would you be hesitant to start two rookies on the O line to start the season, even with all their college experience?
Uh, Not really, because I think they're going to be your five best guys. I think maybe Dan Moore had a great training camp last year. I remember that, and we were like, did he turn the corner? And then the season came, and it was pretty obvious it didn't. I think at
Mhm.
this point, you got to start looking at Fautanu, and as long as he's like a base level player, and I expect him to be a base level player, I'm not really worried about it because you have multiple guys on the line with experience calling protections, including Zach Frazier, who's done that for 4 years. But Daniels and Sayamalo have done it too. So, like, if you need to have someone from a guard spot call protections, it can happen. There has Mason McCormick, by the way, my like favorite little nugget of him is that he called protections from his left guard spot earlier this
Oh,
year for a few games.
mm,
While their center was kind of getting up to speed with it, he was calling protections from left guard. But so it can be done. I don't really have a lot of worry. I'm sure there's going to be ups and downs with it. There were ups and downs last year with Broderick. There were ups and downs with Joey, Keanu, all of them are going to have ups and downs because they're rooks. But I think Fautanu and Frazier, I don't really know the benefit of sitting those two guys. They're polished guys that are ready to come in and play. So I would play them because I
yeah.
think the upside with them, by the time you're after the bye week and in the second half of the season, those guys should be playing like well-oiled machines. Like I truly believe Fautanu has the upside to be the best lineman on the team by the time the season ends.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. You said the word polish there. You said it with Roman Wilson. That's what I was going to say. I mean, I don't know if it was a specific way of targeting the draft, but this draft haul, they got like older prospects this time
Oh yeah,
around. So,
super
like,
polished guys.
right.
Like
So I'm in full agreement. Like, I think that I never want to call anybody pro ready, but like they're more advanced than a lot of guys that they've brought in past draft classes. So, like, I don't think that this is another like Broderick situation. He still played relatively early. It's not like he sat an entire year. Um, but I do think that these guys are going to be ready to go. And when I say ready to go, I still, like you, expect to see some growing pains along the way, but they're going to be better for it in the long run.
yeah, I agree with that. Even the best rookies have growing pains throughout their rookie year. I mean, CJ Stroud had a few every now and then. Puka had a few every now and then. Like those are the best rookies. They still have some growing pains every now and then, and so they
Mhm.
will. But I'm okay with that because these guys are going to be part of your foundational future. All three of them are, but specifically on the line, Fautano and Frazier, I think, need to play right away. I don't see a lot of benefit towards sitting them because I think they are your best center and best one of your top two best tackles on the team.
Yeah. This is an interesting question just because you brought up the addition of Mason McCormick, who can play primarily left guard, but it is interesting that he called out protections. I wonder if some teams were viewing him as a center because we heard some of that chatter for that reason. But Fragment 420 says, do you think Nate Herbig or one of the inside linebackers could become a cap casualty before the season begins after the draft additions?
My question would be cap for what? Like, what would it be used for?
Yeah.
Because they have about 19 in cap right now. After the draft class, I believe they'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10ish or somewhere around there. So they'll still have room to like move about.
Which they
Um,
like to go into the season with, like in that
yeah,
range. Yeah.
yeah. So and then the practice squad has so many, and yeah. But like they have enough to make moves right now. I don't see the reason to cut Nate Herbig. Um, Quality depth. It's like the trading Dan Moore thing. Um,
Mm, yeah.
Maybe if you have guys like, okay, here's where you could become a cap, not really a cap casualty, but a casualty of younger players. Let's say McCormick is having a great camp and Spencer Anderson in year two just looks great, like great interior swingman. All right, then maybe you trade Nate Herbig. Same thing with Dan Moore, right? Okay, Anderson looks good, Dylan Cook looks good. You could trade him. But you don't want to trade those guys until you see the other guys. Are they good enough? Because Dan Moore, even if he's not a starting caliber guy, is a really good top backup tackle to have. Like he's a really good
Mhm.
top backup tackle to have. So Broderick or Falatanu got hurt. Dan Moore stepping in for a few games is fine, right? Like I don't see a reason for Nate Herbie to become a casualty because he's a good player as an interior swingman. So don't really see the reason for that unless these young guys really step up, and we still have to see that throughout camp, preseason, etc. For the inside linebackers, Holcomb would probably be the likeliest option. They're like, there's no way they're cutting Landon Roberts.
Mhm.
Um, my guess is they would only do that if it's like so bad he's not going to play again. Like that's the only way I could see that. Maybe after the season I could see it. But I think they would like to have Cole Holcomb play if possible because I don't know what the linebacking core is going to look like other than the week one stars are going to be Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts. Um, I really don't know. Like Peyton Wilson might be a special teams only guy this year. He might play a lot. That's a question. But do I expect Holcomb to be cut? No. So I don't really expect a cap casualty for cap reasons. But I could see them trading Herbig like they did with like Kendrick Green or Kevin Dotson if they like the young guys
Mm,
showing out down there.
that's fair. Yeah, that I mean that would be the only. I went into this question thinking it was going to be easily a no, but to that point, like if there is a situation that like rises, like last year, I guess there is a path somewhat there.
For sure.
Whitsburg, do you think the Steelers will look to bring back Marcus Golden? I thought about this a lot too. I'm surprised honestly that he hasn't gone anywhere yet. Obviously, we have hopes for Nick Herbig to be able to step into a larger role in year two. But whether it's his edge 3 or edge 4, I would love to have Marcus Golden back on this roster.
Yeah, it doesn't offer a ton of special teams upside, which is a little bit worrying whenever you're that edge four, especially if Herbig's going to play a lot more. But listen, I mean, behind Herbig, it's a bunch of questions. I think they like Jeremiah Moon. I do think they like him. Got him from the
Yeah,
Ravens. He's a freak athlete that has a ton of
yeah.
upside. So I get it. I get it. But no one really certain in that room right now aside from him. So, I'm not going to rule out Marcus Golden coming back. I'm sure he's going to wait it out and see if he can get an edge 3 role somewhere where he's the main rotational backup. But if the summer comes around and no one's really coming around, I think the Steelers should sign him back. Absolutely. Because I just think he was productive in his limited time that he got on the field. I thought he was still pretty good.
Hmm.
I do think Herbig should be the 3 no matter what, though. I thought Herbig became really good by the end of the year. He was
Yeah.
dynamite, and I don't want to hurt Herbig's development.
Mm,
Not playing him a lot more. Bryce, I thought about this a lot. Nick Herbig has a real chance to become the next Bryce Huff. Like he really does, just because
mm.
he's such a crafty pass rusher. He's got such a deep bag. He's so explosive, so bendy. So yeah, I would like to see him be the 3, but listen, if Golden doesn't find a 3 somewhere and it's training camp and the Steelers still need a 4, I think they should call him back up.
Would love to see them get reps with all 3 of those guys on the field. That is Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig. Um, if the Steelers defense ready to get back to dynamic blitzes? I'm excited to see pressure coming from inside linebacker and slot corner. This is from Ben. I think with the addition of Patrick Queen, this makes this even more of an interesting question. Probably where this is coming from.
And Peyton Wilson, who was just really good
Peyton
blitzing,
Wilson,
man. Lines up on
even
the edge.
off, he can do it off the I'll say he do it off the edge as well.
Yeah, he lined up everywhere. Man, Peyton Wilson was like Isaiah Simmons level versatility in terms of where they used him. Because he could blitz, man. He can do a ton of things. I'm really interested to see how they can deploy him. Those 3 backer, you talk about having 3 outside backers with Herbig on the field, man. You could even throw, Wilson on the field and just let him wreck shop. But they have 3 really good blitzers from the inside linebacker spot now. Landon Roberts is extremely good at blitzing. On top of that, Queen's very instinctive at it. I think what they really need to make that churn is that slot corner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who is that slot going to be? Is it going to if it's Beanie Bishop? Yeah, you can do it. Beanie Bishop is like 5'9", but he's an absolute dog in terms of his mentality. He loves getting down in the blitzes and run game. He's like a firecracker, man. Massive chip on that guy's shoulder. I'm interested to kind of see what he can do. But if they re-sign like Cam Sutton or Patrick Peterson, I think, a little bit more questions. Shannon Sullivan can probably do that. But and Sean Elliott, I think, has an ability to do this too. In the 3 safety package where KZ's playing back and they can bring, Elliott down into the box and probably use him interestingly. So I hope so. I hope we see some more kind of interesting blitzes because I feel like they can be so creative up front. They have such
Mm-hmm.
dynamic weapons at the second level. And really with obviously TJ and Highsmith and Herbig, they have 3 great edge rushers to where they can cook this stuff up. So I hope so. I can't definitively answer that right now, but the personnel certainly says that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we know where we want to go with this, but John says, with the draft behind us, what is the number one priority in trade free agent season? Who is the best fit for us on the market? I mean, we've talked so much about wide receivers, right? I guess we should bring in like the slot corner element into this as well. They did add Beanie Bishop as a UDFA, Josiah Scott on the roster right now. There's been some smoke regarding, would they turn back to Cam Sutton reunion or Patrick Peterson or Shannon Sullivan coming back into the fold? But I would say that those are probably the two areas to look at, Nick. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Slot corner and I mean, if you want to go with some buzzier names, there's a few safeties that are still out there that are slot
Yeah.
capable. Justin Simmons, Quandre Diggs, some of these guys that are slot capable at safety. Don't expect them to go that route. Expect them to go cheaper. There's even other names out there on the slot market that we haven't really even talked about, like K'Wan Williams and other guys like that if they want to bring in a true outside guy. But wide receiver probably is. I mean, I guess slot has to be number one right now just because they don't really have one. So I guess by default that is, but receiver is like the one where it's like, okay, figure this out because I think they'll be able to figure out slot corner pretty easily. There's just a lot of options out there from slot corners. So receiver is going to be like, okay, that one needs figured out. And again, there's options. We talked about the options on the trade market that really don't seem like options right now because it seems like the Steelers are getting
Mm-hmm.
the cold shoulder from a lot of them. So maybe the free agency market's the move there. But wide receiver, slot corner.
He also asked for who would be the best fits. I don't know if any specific names come to mind. I mean, we've talked about the receivers, but like, who do you think is the best fit out of the slot corner market?
The best fit. I mean, they all have their ups and downs. Pat
Mm-hmm.
Pete is just washed, but can probably do slot fine. Shannon Sullivan had a really nice end of the year. Cam Sutton obviously has the off-field domestic violence concerns, and
Yeah.
then on top of it, honestly, did not play very well last year in Detroit. Um, Maybe if he just sticks to the slot, he would be better. But there's the off-field stuff there too. So it's a hard question to answer because honestly, again, I don't really know all the answers to the Cam Sutton equation from a legal perspective. Probably on the field, he's probably the best player of the three. So I guess that's how I would answer that.
I agree, and I'm glad that you put it the way that you did, specifically talking about a football perspective here, because I almost feel like this is I would be looking at like a two-guy tandem here to do the job. Like, I would like to bring back from a football perspective Cam Sutton for the passing down role in the slot, but maybe you'll also bring back Shannon Sullivan to handle the rundown duties from the slot and be the guy, on the slot blitzes and stuff. Again, I would love to see Beanie Bishop get a shot because even as a UDFA, I do think there's something to tap into with him. But out of like outside free agents, I think that would be a decent route for them to go as a two-man tandem for the job.
Yeah, I think that they would really work off each other well. I think I'm expecting Patrick Peterson. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to predictively say one, that would probably be the route that I would guess that they're going to go as well. Eli says, where would you place Jones and Faetanu? Because there's been some smoke about this as well. Like, they've said going back to the owners' meetings, combine, stuff like that, that eventually they want Broderick to be on the left. And then they draft another tackle that played on the left at Washington, although the quarterback left-handed, so he wasn't blocking the blind side there, but more so about the footwork is what I'm looking at. How do you think that they end up lining up?
Yeah, you look at those guys, and I don't think you should have an answer right now to that. And the reason is I couldn't say Fautano probably. If I'm saying it right now, probably Fautano to the right, Broderick to the left. And the reason I'm saying that is just because I think Broderick is more comfortable on the left. But who knows? Maybe after an entire offseason, Broderick is like really comfortable on the right. Looks better there. Boom, Fautano's on the left. I think they should let this one play out through OTAs, training camp, play them both at both spots and kind of see where, what performance is best where. I really think it's going to be a wait and see approach. I don't think you should kind of force this on anybody yet. Um, right now, I'm going to tentatively say Broderick at left, Fautano at right, just because
Yeah.
I know where Broderick is most comfortable. But who knows? Fautano could go out there at right tackle and look awful for all I know. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he could look terrible and just not be comfortable there at all. And maybe Broderick looks more comfortable. So I think it's a play it out thing. They don't have to rush this decision at all. So let's kind of see where everything goes there. But My kind of tentative thing before seeing them this summer is I would play Falatano on the right and Broderick on the left.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement though. I think that they should both get reps there up until you feel like you have a definitive answer, and then let them get comfortable from that point on. So, yeah, I'm with you there. And then last one we'll get here, Lord Megatron's ops is how high of a priority is corner still? But they mentioned guys on the outside. So do you think that they're still in play for like a Gilmore, Xavier Howard, somebody of that ilk? Actually, over this past weekend, somebody mentioned Xavier Howard to me. Somebody that's has given me information in the past said that there has been a conversation there with him. Now, when that conversation was it before the draft? I don't know. But yeah, do you think there's still the chance for them to add an outside corner to this roster?
I guess if they're trying to makes Jackson the slot, there would be. Because Jackson hasn't played in the slot, but has the build that would indicate he could play in the slot, right? And he did at LSU, but obviously that was like 6, 7 years ago. So
Mhm.
I think it's interesting to kind of ask on that front. Maybe they have a plan to try and move Dante Jackson into the slot, in which case, obviously, the profile of the target would change. It would change to those outside guys like a Gilmore, a Xavier Howard. I don't right now, if you're asking me, I don't think that's where they're looking. I would imagine they are looking more on the interior side because those guys are going to be cheaper. On top of that, now they could pull off a trade, on the outside too. Maybe, the Eagles just drafted Cooper DeJean um and Quinyon Mitchell. I don't know,
Mhm.
can you pry one of the corners out of there? You know, Adoree Jackson's still a free agent too.
Yeah.
Could be him, that you look at. Again, these are guys that have various questions um, to their games. But Steven Nelson's out there. Wow. That would be an old name,
Yeah.
but he was pretty good last year. So,
Talked about a Cam Sutton reunion. How about a
yeah,
Steven Nelson reunion?
if they're looking for outside guys, man, I mean, Steven Nelson would be like a pretty decent player. Um, you look at his coverage reps, and it's pretty similar to a lot of the top 20 corners. So he was pretty good last year. So he would be an interesting name. Actually, I'm almost like for what the cost would be paired with the fit, like Steven Nelson would be a really cool fit actually to them. But I'm kind of looking more at slot corners, I think, right now, until I'm given an indication that they plan to put Dante Jackson in the slot when he's never played there. And that has its
Does
own
he
question.
tackle well? Yeah, does he tackle well enough and like do enough in this like what the Steelers asked their slot corners to do for it to make
Well,
sense?
Pat Pete played in the slot a ton last year, and he doesn't
Right.
tackle
And
well.
I
I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
Dante Jackson, like a good tackler, not very willing, and he tries his butt off. But also, I have very big questions. By the way, my dog is right here right now. You want to see him?
I think the crowd would love to see him.
Here. Come here, dude. Yeah, well, he's right here right now and burying himself into my leg. So, I'm currently being dog assaulted, for pets. But yes, I think Dante Jackson's a very willing tackler, but sometimes just because of his frame and how slight he is, he sometimes falls off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a good way to put it. It's not for a lack of effort on his part, and maybe they can clean up some of the technique. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if that's where they see him being fit. Then yeah, outside corner is back in play. But like you, I do think that they will look for somebody that is slot specific. All right. Well, I think that's it. Great conversation today. Thank you for those questions you guys got, and leave us some more in the comments of the show to answer on tomorrow's episode. Nick, tell the people where they could find you until then.
Hey, you can find me on Twitter, X at Farabaugh Make sure to read stuff over at SteelersNow.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, leave a comment on the YouTube channel as well.
There we go. Also, if you are not on YouTube and you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review over there and subscribe so you get a notification from that platform whenever a new audio version of the episode goes out. You can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. As Nick said, go check out everything on the site. Till tomorrow's episode, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.